Ever since I made these wheel wells, I always felt they were a little on the big side, but I wasn't sure how to finish them off. I got the fender fixed, but I had to make a few other adjustments along the way. Let me show you what happened. The other day I heard a noise from the front end of the shop truck. I thought it might need brakes. I took the caliper off, pads looked totally fine, but then I spun it. That needs bearings, at least. Let's pop this apart and see what we got. Looks a little rusty in there. That part of the spindle looks awfully black. It looks like heat has discolored it. Let's see how that inner bearing looks. Oh yeah, there's rust pitting. Part of the cage is broken, and those rollers actually move around on their own. This bearing was seizing up as I drive. You see the roller can move around and actually jam up into the bearing next to it. That would fall into the very bad category. Clean the spindle up a little bit. You can tell it turned blue from heat, and that inner race area is totally roasted. Luckily, I've got another Dodge front suspension on this trailer. I used a Dodge dually to make this trailer, and that looks almost identical. This is an early 70s model, but everything looks the same. Even brake calipers mount the same and everything. So let's see if I can use this thing as parts to get my truck up and running. I started pulling apart the dually front end on this trailer. A couple things I noticed right away. First thing is the pads are a little bit worn. And the second thing, that rolls well. Those bearings sound fine. Wonder if I could just steal this whole unit and put it on the other truck. There we go. Easy as that. Mangled my pickle fork though. That's better. Got a spindle that might work. Now these are the dually wheel spindles, and I popped in a bolt right in the bottom holes. I wanted to take a look at this upper joint, and that one looks like it'll fit fine. So we're okay there. Then I went to put in the other bolt. Those holes don't line up. On this older spindle, these two bolts are actually further apart than the newer ones. So this will not work. And I'll show you why this won't work. Let's take a closer look at this bottom section. Now this bottom ball joint has the spring on that arm, so this is taking all the way to the vehicle. The thread diameter is right around 3/4 of an inch, and this tie rod end is over 2 inches across. Back to the trailer front end, that tie rod end, this is a measurement from the other tie rod. This one's way smaller. And the thread is 11/16. So that's a smaller ball joint and a smaller tie rod. So I do not want to use that lower piece. And that's where the bolt spacing is. And you can't really re-drill it. There's not much meat or anything like that. Let's take a look at the differences in these two spindles. We already know that hole spacing's different. This one right here is the early 70s one. That's running a little over 5 inches, almost 5.1 by rough measurement. This one's much smaller, somewhere around 4.6. The other thing I noticed, the 90, it's pretty much all one casting here. On the, I think this is a 73, it has a main casting, which has the upper ball joint mount, and then the brake caliper is held in by another casting that's bolted on. I'm wondering if it's because disc brakes were a new thing then, and they're using a spindle that was meant for a drum. But either way, that's a separate piece. Now I'm going to take a look at this spindle. Oil seal diameter, 2.278 or so. Yeah, 2.279, something like that. They're the same. Check the inner bearing. 1.625. I'm getting a 1.622. The end here, just under 1 inch. Same thing on this one. Threads are different. I can tell that by eye. This is around a 1 inch thread. This one's around 7/8. Basically, all the working part of the spindle is identical, just the thread's smaller on the newer one. But the part that matters is the same. This one has a slightly bigger corner radius. This one has a smaller one, but I don't think that'll matter a whole lot. That one's a little stronger though. Let's flip these things over. You can see on the older one, the brake caliper bracket itself bolts on. Then there's that other bracket that connects them. This one bolts straight to the main casting. Upper ball joint mount goes down. This one goes straight into the main plate here. This one does basically the same thing, but on this main plate, there's a couple of ribs. Let's see if I can get a good angle on that. I'm gonna make a shadow here. There we go. There's the center where they turned it. This goes down past that center, so we have bracing past the center line of the spindle. This one connects well above the center line. There's no bracing at all. That'll make this one a stronger spindle. So that's the one I want to use, and that's the one that fits. So, bonus. I was concerned how much heat went into that spindle. I wanted to compare this a little more. So I called my buddy Skipper, and shortly, I had another front suspension. This was off an early 90s diesel, so it should be exactly what I need for that truck. Now he completely wore out his truck before taking it apart. The brake caliper brackets are mangled over. Ball joints have some issues. This was definitely at the end of its life. These also have that webbing on them that I was showing you in my original ones, so this is the stronger spindle. I want those, as long as they look good inside. Apparently I'm not the only one who's welded in ball joints before. Comparing my old spindle to the one I just got, my old spindle has that nice burn section in the bluing where it got really overheated. This one looks pretty decent. A few scuff marks, but not bad, and no bluing to indicate overheating. The backing plate behind the rotor isn't as nice as that one. I think I'm going to swap those around. I've been comparing these two spindles and second guessing myself. I went to measure the bearing diameter, assuming it was going to be bigger than my old ones. It's 1.619. That is actually smaller than the one I thought was worn out, because that is running about 623. So by wear, my spindle's better. Now I was concerned because of the bluing that the material might have been softened up and been weaker, but now that I have the two out and I can compare them, I've been dragging a file across it, trying to get a good feel for the hardness. They really feel about the same. I'm working on the tapered area here so I don't affect the bearing diameters. This one bites in reasonably, about the same as this one. In fact, this one might be a little bit harder. This spindle with the burn marks and the bluing is actually the better spindle. I've seen how much he worked this truck and the wheels still stayed on. So if this one worked, I know that one will. So I'm putting my old ones back on. Now I have a spindle on that's good enough. There's my old rotor, and I know the bearings are bad in that. I'm not putting that one back on. That's a spare one I just got, but the spindle was really bad in that one, so I suspect the bearings are bad. That's the one from the trailer, which spun nicely and the spindle looked good. Let's see if that one fits. That actually seems pretty good. Even though the bearings seem okay, the bare minimum I should do is putting in a new grease seal. So I'm just going to completely ignore that, because this makes the truck a dually. I don't know if I want it to be a dually. I figure this is good enough for a few hundred miles to try it out. So I'm just going to pump some fresh grease in. We'll give it, a lot of pumps. I'm repacking the outer one so I can get to it. A lot of crud is getting pumped out of it. I definitely will need to do bearings soon, but I'm going to see if I like this first, because who knows, I might not be using this one. I'll just swipe away all the crud. One nice thing about this packing method is it pushes stuff out. That rag will never be used again. The single rear wheel spindle has a smaller nut and washer, so I'm just reusing those parts. I think everything will fit fine. Probably. Close enough. This bearing packer gets real messy. I just keep it in a bag. That way I can just keep reusing the grease over and over again. I don't have to clean up nearly as much. The counter pin didn't really want to fit in well, but I got it in there, and it's locked down. And now, it spins nice. No noise, no grinding, no scraping. Looks like the brakes fit fine. Those old rusty rotors are going to eat right through those brake pads. But that's okay, because brake pads are a lot cheaper than having that rotor turned. Right now, trying this out doesn't cost me anything. I'm going to be able to find out whether I like it being a dually. And then, once those pads get in the way and the rotor's clean, which should be in a couple 100 miles, I could take the whole thing apart and either put new bearings in this one or switch back to my old stuff. But we're going to learn something here. I always like that. As an added bonus, this hub has left-hand threads, so you have to turn it the loosened direction to tighten it. That'll be an anti-theft feature so no one steals these fancy rims. So for now I'm going to run the dually front wheels and the single rear wheels and see how I like it. In the meantime, I got some interior work to do. When I installed this radio, I realized the volume went from off to full. And that was it. There's no in between. And I fiddled with it a little bit, but that's all I've got. So I'm going to pull this out and do something different here. Now this is a radio I bought on clearance actually a couple years ago. It was such a good deal I had to buy it, but I never really had a use for it. One thing that's important here, it's got a GPS antenna. If you're going scrounging used parts in places you're not familiar with, GPS can be very handy. So we're going to see if this fits. No, it does not. Alright, we're going to see if we can make this fit. This radio is really bulky, but it's not that heavy. We're just going to do a little disassembly here. We have the touchscreen, and you look inside, that's what actually does anything. Most of this box is completely wasted space. So rather than cut apart my 35-year-old dashboard, I'm going to cut apart my brand new radio. Using my old radio as a height guide, I'm going to see how much I can take off. These front two holes are what mounted the faceplate, and it looks like I can fit both of them. So I'm going to trim right above the top hole, and that should give me enough room to work with. I'm pretty sure that voided the warranty. I've got my top trimmed off, the back trimmed off, all the components back in, and I think I'm going to take the front edge off this cover and reinstall that just a little bit lower. I used a couple mounting screws to attach that top cover. I think it all fits together pretty decent. So we now have a radio that fits in our enclosure. Found a color-coded wiring diagram online for the truck, got the wiring diagram for the radio, and now I got about an hour of splicing ahead of me. Whoever designed the color scheme of this GPS, with tanned roads on tanned background, you really need to pick some other colors. It's a pretty good sunset though. Makes for good driving. That radio will hook to this backup camera so I can actually see what I'm doing when I'm backing up. And that unit gets its power from the reverse lights, so it only goes on when you're backing up. But I never installed reverse lights. This is a good time to do that. I went on Amazon and picked up a set of these little square lights. Nothing too fancy. We're going to pop these right there. That'll be better for backing up. I've been running the dually front wheel and the single rear wheel for months now. Going on almost 10 months. And I like this on the front. The brakes cleaned up beautifully. Still have a bit of life in those pads too. So now it's time to work on the rear. When I was working on this rear end, I noticed I had the rear drum inset just like a dually does. So let's see how this tire fits. There's actually more than one type of dually wheel. This is what's referred to as a coined wheel. You actually have raised sections and tapered sections that interlock the two rims together. You can also get styles with straight holes. These are not raised or inset. They're just completely flat and a straight bore. On the coined wheel, there's raised sections on both sides. So here where the two mount together, but also here where it's got to fit flat against the hub. On these factory dually hubs, you can see a countersink machined in, and that provides a relief for those coined wheels. The raised section sits inside there, and the main part of the wheel sits flush. This hub means you have to use those coined wheels. There is no raised center, so it could be hub-centric. It's got to be lug-centric, because the lugs are the only thing that can center it up and keep it in position. And this doesn't look like it has reliefs to fit this style wheel. This coin style wheel does not actually fit flush. You can see a gap. The next problem I have is this tire hits the bed. This isn't all the way on, and it's already rubbing right here. I put my jack under the frame to droop the suspension as much as possible, and now I got tons of clearance on the body. And I was able to bolt the rim on. Now let's see what else is a problem, because that spring is awfully close. Even though it's close, it's not touching. There's a little bit of a gap there. Both sides have clearance. So now all I have to deal with is the body, and that's just sheet metal. It's easy to clearance that stuff. Where shall I cut? To help me figure out where to cut those wheel wells, I spent $100 on this. This is a 5th wheel hitch. The thing that interests me most about it are the mounting brackets. These go right over the wheel wells. Looks like it should go something like this. The mounting brackets are right in the wheel well area. They contact the wheel well itself right there. The end of the wheel well is there, and it covers up a little bit more than that. So when I trim out those wheel wells, I can use that bracket as a guide and add a new piece on the inside that mounts to that bracket. I didn't actually look into how you're supposed to mount these things. I know they're supposed to be around the center line of the rear axle or forward of it. So I took a look at one that was made a little more professionally. I took a look at this truck, because that's the same style hitch. You can see the center line of the wheels is significantly behind where the weight of the trailer is. Also, this one has an adjusting track. You can pull those levers and slide the entire thing forward. As you move it forward, it'll transfer more weight to the front wheels and evenly distribute that all around all the tires. That seems like it'll be a good idea. I noticed that these brackets have extra holes that way, but not this way. And it looks like you can unbolt these pivots and move them forward and put them wherever you want in reference to the center line. Now this rib here seems to be dead center. I'm going to start just on the forward side of that, and then there's a lot more adjustment if I need to move it. In worst case scenario, I could drill more holes over here. I used the outer line of that brace to figure out how far I could go this way, and I used the other side to see how much I could take out here. So now I've got a lot of clearance here. And if I did make a mistake, I cut it pretty close. I could weld this thing back in if needed. But I don't think it'll be needed. You can see all the clearance I gained in here. So now we have to see, we change out the single wheel for dually, where it ends up. With my inner dual wheel on, I still have a little spring clearance, and I can look at the tire to bed clearance. Putting a square on the inner edge, I can drop my new fender wells down, and I got my alignment pretty good there. It's a lot easier to see stuff when there's no wheel well here. While I've got everything open, I want to make this brace a little more sturdy. As far as strength in that hitch goes, I'm not really worried about the truck pulling a trailer. The pulling force where the truck goes forward and the trailer pulls backwards on it as you accelerate is only done with the rear wheels. And I'm not going to be accelerating that fast. The stopping force is done by all 4 wheels. So if I come to a sudden stop, that trailer pushing forward against the truck is going to be my highest force. Hopefully it never happens, but if I come to a really sudden stop, like running into something, that trailer pushing forward is going to be a lot of force. I want most of the strength to resist rotating this way. So that side is going to be in compression, that side is going to be in tension. So that's what I want to keep in mind when I make these supports. I drilled holes through in the mounting feet. That way I can put a bolt in and see what it looks like on the bottom side. And the bolt comes through around here somewhere that I can't really see. I got to get this drawer out of the way. Luckily, when I installed them, I made them removable. Now that's a lot easier to get to. The hitch load is going right through where that bolt is. I'm going to take a piece of 2x2 angle and put it right there. The front foot of that hitch is directly on top of this plate, and that's pretty thick metal, so that's going to resist it pushing through. This piece is sized to connect to a bunch of strong stuff down here. We've got the double layer of sheet metal right there. We also have this cross member that goes across the entire bed, and the extra thick piece of material here that actually connects the bed directly to the frame. The front's all welded together onto the rear. The mounting hole in the rear is next to that double layer of material. You can see the spot welds there, but not near any cross members. I got one there, I've got one here. So I'm going to connect those two with a piece of square tubing, like that. Before permanently installing it, I drilled a few extra holes in the floor. Over the years, this bed floor has had a lot of things thrown in it, and it's all over the place. Rather than straighten it out properly, I'm just going to use the brace I'm installing to straighten the thing out. Got a little wood block stack here, a jack. We're just going to lift that up into place until there's no more gap. I put globs of weld in the general vicinity of the brace until it looked like it would stay there. On the top side, you can see that brace in place. I'm going to match drill this hole. I'm going to start in the middle of these holes and weld them up, and that'll connect these together nicely. Welding upside down is a pain. This is real easy. Now I know it's connected every few inches here. I also used a hole saw to make a big hole where that bolt goes. So I want to fit a washer in there. But I want to fit a washer that's bigger than this hole, which means it can't be round. Let's see what the pile gives us. Looking for some kind of flat stock. I already have like 3 layers of metal, so 1/4 inch is a bit overkill. What do we have here? That might do it. It already has holes started. And the cuts I need are already started. This is perfect. There's my washer. Takes a little bit of fishing to get this to go together, but it does eventually work. I was talking to a friend of mine last night about the bracing that was going in here, and I mentioned that the reinforcements I'm putting in are right above the suspension mounting points, so I can tie those together really easy. Same thing on the rear, that mounting point is right above a suspension point. I can make the hitch super sturdy attached right to the weight-bearing points of the frame. And then I realized, I don't actually have a trailer yet. I've been eyeing a few trailers in my price range, and they look pretty nice. But until I actually buy a trailer, I won't know how much weight I can haul. So there's no point in doing all that until then. Right now, I feel pretty confident for a fairly heavy load, just not extremely heavy. But it's definitely enough to bring home a trailer when I buy one, then I'll figure out the rest. I can always add that later if needed. I'm ready to put the side boxes back in and button this whole thing up. Not too long ago, I installed this rear axle because it had a better gear ratio. And I didn't bother doing any real freshening up because I didn't know if I'd want that gear ratio. I might have been swapping it back. But I'm pretty happy with the highway gears, so I want to keep this one. Now it does have a few issues. It's completely soaked on the bottom and dripping fluid. And it looks like it's all coming from this pinion seal, so I got to take care of that. The torque on that nut is supposed to be 220 to 280 foot-pounds, so we're looking at 250. And I don't have a torque wrench that goes up to 250, but I do have a tape measure. When they're talking torque, you're talking a force at a distance. So 250 foot-pounds means a foot away from the pivot point, which is right here, you have to put 250 pounds of force. I weigh pretty close to that, so I could probably just lean on this and be fine if it was horizontal. But I can't make it horizontal because the gas tank's in the way. I'm going to figure this is roughly a 45-degree angle. And if you felt like it, you could calculate the vector force with your sines and your cosines and all that. What I'm going to do instead is move my hand to the end of the handle, hang on this thing, we should be fine. There, precision torque, kinda. I did the math afterwards. That's an 18-inch long handle on the ratchet. So apparently good enough really was good enough. Got plenty of fluid in the rear end. I also want to tell you about a little issue I had with the brakes. When I swapped this in, the brakes were really bad. That's a pretty impressive wear on those brake pads. So I took the backing plate off the axle that I had pulled out of here, because those brakes were working, and I put it straight on here. And all our problems should be solved. But it still wasn't quite right. It felt like the brakes were dragging just a little bit sometimes. Pretty sure that's not a good sign. That might have been sticking a little bit. I went all out on this, even doing new bearings and everything. I got the whole thing buttoned up, and then I saw the locking tab that's supposed to hold the spindle nut on. This is a perfect opportunity to see if those wheel bearings actually did fill with oil, and how much is in there. Oh yeah, those bearings are totally full of gear oil. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Apparently it's handy to forget to install parts. Hopefully I won't need to take that drum off for at least a decade. Maybe 2. So now, to convert to dual wheels, I gotta take this drum off again. Because these studs are fine for 1 wheel, but they're not enough for 2. I got the drum off again, and I pulled out one of the studs. I want to show you a side-by-side comparison, because these differences are a little bit subtle. You might notice there's a little bit of a size difference. Those will hold on 2 wheels. The spline section here on the single wheel stuff is the same as the spline section on the dual wheel stuff. They use the same hub and drum for both configurations. So these bigger studs fit right in. These studs are actually too long to fit inside my deep well sockets. They'd bottom out before I got them driven in all the way. So I'm putting a socket on either side to support it, and then driving it in between. Got everything back together with the much larger studs in there. While the studs were out, I could have machined a taper into the hub to give it the countersink it needs to fit those coined wheels. But as close as the tires were to that leaf spring, I don't want to go in at all. I want to go out. So I bought these. These are an inexpensive wheel spacer for 8-lug wheel, 1/4 inch thick, made of aluminum. It's got the right 8 lug holes I need, and this is real easy to modify. I also bought this. This is a countersink bit with the right angle and diameter to be compatible with this style wheel. There are different angle countersinks available for different wheels. I've used 60-degree ones before for smaller wheels. This one used the 90-degree included angle. You've got to make sure the angle you need is the angle you're putting in, because that cone helps lock this lug nut in place. That's got to be right, otherwise these are coming loose. There's a lot of countersinks available. Most of them are expensive. This one was not, because this has a kind of specialized twist and lock feature on the end. It doesn't grab on a normal drill chuck or anything like that. So I got it cheap on eBay because most people can't grip this. And I don't have anything that grips it either. But I noticed there's a hole through it. This is made for through coolant where they're pumping a lubricating and cooling oil right through it, and that's just spraying everywhere as they machine. It also gives me a feature to hold it with. The hole is a nice fit for some 5/16 threaded rod. Add a coupler nut on the end of that. We're starting to look promising here. This looks like something I can grab on. I added a few tack welds between the coupler nut and the tool. Not very much. I don't really want to heat the tool up and make it any softer. I just want a little bit of an extra drive here. I also have a nut on the end which is compressing the entire tool, so that helps drive it also. I stacked a few washers here. I can take off this nut, change these out to different sizes. That way I can have a pilot that guides this countersink in and make sure it stays on center. So I think this will work. And now, I can chuck it directly in my drill press here. Now, I have the release I need to run the coined wheels. I can also run the hub-centric wheels if I want, because this one has a center hub. What I can't do is run the hub-centric wheel and the lug-centric wheel at the same time. I still have the issue of those raised centers on the coined wheel will keep it from sitting properly with the flat wheel. But that's only if that wheel stays flat. When you're eyeballing perpendicularity, it helps to use a square to calibrate your eye. My new countersink drive fits a hand drill too. The first one I'm putting on is that hub-centric wheel. It's actually a pretty tight fit. This is going to stay centered fine. Now, I have the release cut in this wheel. That means I got to put the other wheel on in the exact right orientation. If I'm off by one lug nut, then nothing fits and they'll never stay tight. But these wheels have a little indexing hole on them. You could put a pin on the hub, make sure they only go on one way. I didn't do that, but I could have. This coined wheel has that same little indexing hole. I'm just going to line it up by eye. I got two wheels. The lugs are very sturdy. There's no gap in the rims at all. And the gap to the tire looks a lot better too. I think we're in good shape. But I don't recommend anyone actually do this. In my head, it seems like this will work, but just because it works in my head doesn't mean it works in real life. What I am going to do is carry a torque wrench in the truck with me. I'm going to check these on a regular basis, and if the torque level drops, I'll know that something's going wrong before I have a lug come off or we have a real problem with a tire coming off. I'll let you guys know the results, whether it's good or bad, and we'll learn something here. They do stick out past the fenders a little bit, so we got to do something about that, which is good because those fenders were always too big anyway. I've got some leftover diamond plate. Let's see what we can do with that. My plan is to use chunks of diamond plate and weld them to the tubing that makes up the fender. I'm going to kick them out at an angle, that way it makes the wheel well smaller and extends it outwards. The problem is when I come to a corner, because I need to get that junction to line up. When I did these corners here, you basically cut the tube at half the angle you're going. So in this case it went 45 degrees. I cut the ends of the tube at 22.5. That way you add one angle, add the next angle, you get the final one you want. So if these pieces were going on flat, I'd cut the ends at 22.5. But to extend them out, it would be different. To see what to cut to, we're going to extend them all the way. If I made the pieces stick straight out, I wouldn't need to put any kind of angle in them at all. So now I know I go from a completely square corner to 22.5 degrees. If I went out between the two and kicked these out at a 45-degree angle, that's exactly halfway between those 2 points. So halfway between straight and the 22.5-degree angle. For luck, I'm going to round that off to 13 degrees. I cut strips with a 13-degree angle on the end. I wasn't sure whether they should be 4 or 5 inches wide. I went with 5, and I can always cut them later. This width is good enough to try for a while. And now I have some pickup truck stuff to do. So this hitch is in the way, but it comes out easy. I need to take care of these inner fender wells quickly. I've still got a sharp edge where I cut the sheet metal, so I'm going to bend it up. Now the tires have a smooth edge next to them, and I have a nice flange for attaching sheet metal to cover this area. I'm going to take some cardboard and make a template of what I want. Roughly this shape should do. These are actually the drops out of those braces where I use the hole saw to make wrench clearance. Always hang on to these. Very handy for when duct tape doesn't want to stick. So now, not only do I have a template for the metal I want to cut, I have a test piece. Because I don't know how much the axle is going to articulate. That tire might run into this cardboard. And I'd much rather have it run into the cardboard and damage that than have the tire run into sheet metal and have to remake all that. So I'm going to use it for a while like this before I actually cut metal. Trash was building up while I was working on the truck. Let's get rid of that first. This truck is right at home at the recycling center. For some reason I have more used oil to drop off. And bring home a new dryer for my mom. Well, that's it for this video. I'm going to put this truck to work and see how those last few details are going to work out. I'll do an update when I get them done. But for now, this truck has more work to do. This truck isn't necessarily fun itself, but it's really useful and really good at making work easier. And that makes work less unfun. Hope you're having less unfun too. I'll see you next time. First retorque of the wheels, and so far, yeah, they all look good.